Hello to our gorgeous IAMPRO community. Today on our Q&As, we have the gorgeous Julie HESMONDHALGH. She is with us to share her process, her journey into the business. So without further ado, I am going to bring her on. There she is. Hi, Julie.
Hello, Charlie. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm such a huge fan of your work. You really have done some fantastic things.
Thank you. Well, back at you, Charlie, obviously.
Oh,
I'm very honoured to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And working with Russell T Davies on Cucumber, how was that?
Oh, that was just amazing. I mean, that was the first job that I did after Coronation Street, which I was on for 16 years. Some of you might know. Yeah, I know it's really awful because like people often like bring like really young children up to me and say like, "Oh, do you recognise this lady from Corrie?" I'm like, "No, they weren't even born when I left." You know, but it's gone so quickly. It's, you know. But it was a game changer for me, really, having that as my first job out of Corrie, because it set my stall out, really, in terms of like the kind of work that I wanted to do, wanting to be in things that I would want to watch myself. And obviously Russell's writing is just like the best. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. So I had this really, really joyful summer in Manchester with this brilliant bunch of people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, loads of LGBTQ people. And we just had a ball. We had an absolute ball. I mean, it's interesting actually because, you know, it was a relative flop was Cucumber. You know, I mean, we all thought it was going to be. Yeah, people loved it, but it's, you know, it's interesting when you do something and you love it and you feel like it's really good and has worth, and a lot of people dropped off it after the first episode and we never got that back, and we're hoping it's a sin will take people back to it. But it's you never know in this industry, you know what it's like. You can be in something that's a surefire hit and sometimes it just isn't.
You don't know, do you? It's so bizarre. Did you, speaking of It's a Sin, did you obviously saw it?
Oh yeah, it's just amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. And just, it was funny actually, because even though it was really heartbreaking and, you know, and bringing that story, you know, of the AIDS crisis to a generation that know so little about it, I just found it so full of absolute joy as well. And memories of that period where, you know, there was a certain like hedonism and people going out and people living with each other. I mean, it was a really different time because like the culture was different, because you kind of could, especially as a young, you know, actor, you could sign on and you could do bits and stuff and do a bit of bar work and then sign on again. It's so much more difficult for people now, and I feel like they really captured that time so beautifully.
Yeah, such brilliant characters as well. I love it when you see something where you're just drawn into sort of a character-led piece, you know, it's just really gorgeous. So can we go back to the beginning a little bit, your career, and what made you want to be an actor, Julie?
Well, it's something that I'd always loved doing. So I grew up in a little northern industrial town called Accrington. And, you know, but people like me and my mates, you know, we weren't actors. We didn't go into that. So we might have done a bit at school, or, you know, we were very lucky to have a good teacher who might have encouraged us. And I did a really, really brilliant A-level/BTEC course at further education level. And we had just an amazing teacher who'd been an actor himself. And we unfortunately lost him way too soon to COVID last year, right at the beginning of the pandemic. Oh yeah, it's really awful. But I mean, so many of us have got so much to thank this one man for, because he made us feel like it was possible and that it was for the likes of us. And, you know, that then in particular was half the battle, because it was, we weren't seeing ourselves on telly, you know, we weren't seeing people with strong regional accents from, you know, less privileged working class backgrounds, like doing the thing, apart from on the soaps, of course, which has always been, you know, the place where we see ourselves reflected back. But beyond that, you know, that's such a small pool of actors they were using, especially back then, as you know, EastEnders and Corrie must have had a cast of about 15 back then or something. It's like hundreds now. So yeah, he made us just feel like it's something that we could do. And so we all auditioned for drama schools. And of course, you know, it was a different time again. You know, we had full local authority grants to go to drama school. I didn't just have my fees paid, I had like my rent paid in London as well. Otherwise, I just wouldn't have been able to do it. And this is, you know, part of everything that I want to do and I'm trying to do at the moment. And like being part of this today because of the amazing thing that you've set up, Charlie, is just like acknowledging that somewhere along the line, those privileges that were afforded to me as a young working class person have been taken away, and they've been done as they always are, sort of incrementally. You know, they just get snapped away almost without you noticing. And I feel like now any organisation that is trying to fill those gaps and enabling young people to enter, you know, the creative industries in whatever way, I want to get behind, because somehow I feel like my generation took our eye off the ball and let the rug be pulled from under the feet of the people coming through, you know, and that's much to my shame that, you know, we all allowed that to happen, because without it, I wouldn't have been able. I went to LAMDA, you know, which was, you know, and is, you know, one of the poshest drama schools in London. And I was there, and there were, unbelievably, there were 5 of us from Accrington College there at the same time.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Oh, we outnumbered the Etonians.
The drama was a winner.
Amazing.
Amazing the impact that one teacher can have on a young person's life, you know, when you find, you know, that sort of, because they're not everywhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, some kids just look up to that one person. And I've got a drama teacher that I speak about fondly from when I was in my small town of Barmouth, and we did Our Day Out by Willie Russell, and she really encouraged me. And without that, there's no way that I would have had the confidence and the belief to come through and know that it was something possible, you know? I feel like everybody has got that person, you know. I mean, there's been a few for me, actually. You know, there was a primary school teacher, Mrs. Mulderrick, who's still around, who was the first person who sort of said, oh, I think you should do these like English speaking board exams kind of thing where you had to perform. And she was the person who first gave me the passion for it. And very, very sort of importantly, and again, this is a really great friend of mine who I lost last year, not to COVID, but at LAMDA, I met a teacher called Brian Asprey, who I talk about constantly, because he was such a major influence on my life. Because what Brian taught me, so he was a director, and he had set up in South Africa in the 1970s the first multiracial theatre company in Cape Town. And this was at the height of apartheid, where, you know, black and white people were just completely segregated, not allowed to work together. Black people were treated absolutely appallingly, like worse than second-class citizens. And so it was illegal for them to run this multiracial theatre company. And he and his wife, Yvonne Bryceland, who's an amazing actor who ended up coming and living and working in Britain, and Athol Fugard, who's an amazing playwright. If anybody is a lover of theatre, I really urge you to look up his plays. They set up this thing. They were raided by the police constantly because it was illegal, and amazing stories of like they put brooms and mops around the rehearsal room, because the black artists involved would be working every day doing their day jobs as sort of, you know, handymen or cleaners, you know, and then they would come after work to the theatre, and if the police raided, they'd just like pick up a mop and pretend they were cleaners, because they were allowed to do that, but they weren't allowed to be part of the creative process. And I know it's unbelievable. I mean, this relatively recently, you know, and everything that they did there was about ending that oppressive regime, which of course ended with Nelson Mandela being released from prison and becoming president. And he taught me something really, really important, which was that art and culture and theatre can really change the world. That it has a relevance and importance that is beyond just entertainment. And there is absolutely nothing about entertainment. It has to be entertaining first, 100%. And like we're talking about, It's a Sin, and that's a really classic example of that. You know, that is something that was teaching a whole generation about this crisis that happened, and the unbelievable prejudice that was afforded to people who were LGBTQ back then. You know, I mean, right across the board, not being allowed to be teachers in schools, you know, it's like, and it's really important that we tell those stories. But it was also this joyous, entertaining thing. And for me, that's where everything fell into place, because
I'm really, really, I've always wanted to do something that affects society in a positive way, I suppose. And I always felt that the acting was something a bit sort of that was mine and a bit selfish and a bit showy offy, you know, all those sort of prejudices, that internalized prejudices you have yourself about that stuff. And he taught me that those two things, you know, could be combined, that they weren't mutually exclusive, and that there's a place in the middle where you can do both those things. And I feel like that has informed my work as an actor all through my career, actually, right from playing Hayley in Coronation Street, which was a job that I seized with both hands, because I'd seen firsthand so many times about how soaps in particular can really change the national conversation about different issues. And it was never Corrie, actually. It was always EastEnders. It was always Brookside who did that. You know, they were the issue-based ones. Yeah, and that was an opportunity for me to play in a trans character back, you know, back when it would have been really, really hard for a trans actor to play that part because of the way that the press looks at trans people back then in particular. But to play that part with a hope, integrity, but also with like a strong sense of knowing that I was representing a group of people who hadn't really been represented on telly before in such a big way. Massively.
That was the first time with Hayley, really, wasn't it? That we had a character like that in the mainstream, on mainstream TV.
Yeah, absolutely, which is something I'm always so proud. And I think, you know, honestly, that it was always meant to be, because like Corrie's always very light, and I think it was meant to be a bit of a joke. You know, I was supposed to be one of a series of dates for Hayley Cropper. And actually just like that bit of sort of like magic happened where there was that chemistry there and people got behind the relationship and they couldn't get rid of me. I mean, that was completely my intention to stay, you know, so it worked out brilliantly. Yeah. You know, I would never in my head been there for 3 months. I was there for the long haul. And that was it. And that's how you change things. You know, when you have somebody in your living room who you know and care about and who is familiar to you, that's how you end prejudice, because you just go, oh, like I know this person. So the next time you hear about that issue, it suddenly has a person attached to it who you care about. So it changes things.
And does that really have an effect on the choices that you make with the work that you have done in the past and coming up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, you know, that feels like such a position of privilege, because obviously, you know, you know, Shirley, it's not like I sit here going like, oh, I will only do things that, you know, have something really important to say about the world.
Yeah, it's hard though, isn't it? That finding that balance, because, you know, for me, I have spent a lot of time unemployed, and so if something comes up, I'm like, oh, well, I need to work, but also you want to stay true to, you know, jobs that, and stories that you really want to tell that unfortunately aren't always available to us, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely right. And so I would never, you know, I would never judge anybody for doing whatever, you know, in order to make a living and feed themselves and their families or whatever, you know. But if you're in a position where you can be a position of privilege, where you can be a bit braver, I suppose, about your choices, then it's always worth it. The not to grab the first thing that comes along. And I think that once you set your stall as somebody who's interested in that kind of work, it sort of has come to me. It's not like I've sought it out. I think that people know that I will deal with something. You know, I mean, there's actors who are absolutely amazing actors, but aren't always necessarily brilliant at the stuff around it, you know, and the characters I've played, like, for example, playing a rape survivor in Broadchurch, I think that they know that I will educate myself about those issues and be a good and positive sports person for them as well. And that is just like a really massive part of the job, whether you like it or not. So that's something I've had to get good at. And I think that that's stood me in really good stead, actually.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you know, and not many people, like you say, can do that or do that. And I was having a conversation with an actor the other day about, I suppose it is carving out your career so that you can be in a position to take those roles. And he was talking about the power of no, actually. And, you know, being able to say no. Of course, it depends on, there are some things that I haven't been able to because of my life, have a daughter to support and that sort of thing. But it was just really thought provoking about what stories I would like to be part of telling, and how I can bring that into my career somehow. You know, and when they say carve it out, you really do have to make definite choices about how you're going to approach things, and it's not always easy, is it?
No, it isn't. And there could be different things, you know. I mean, sometimes I've said yes to things because of the people that have been involved and, you know, people that I'd really love to work with, you know, and that I know that it'll be an enriching and really enjoyable experience for me. But the no thing is really, really important. And again, always with the caveat of, like, you know, it's a privileged position. I am aware of that. But for example, with Broadchurch, that was offered to me. Now, people think you're absolutely crazy to even hesitate, because, you know, it was already a massive success. It was a third series, and it was the guest lead. But it was really, really and genuinely, it was really important to me that I knew that this was a rape storyline. But I didn't know about the team behind Broadchurch. I didn't know about Chris Chibnall. I didn't know what his outlook would be. And I've seen too often, you know, rape being misrepresented on screen, and it being something salacious and something about, you know, a young woman being pursued through the woods, it being, you know, gratuitous. And I knew that I didn't want to be involved in anything like that. I didn't want my face to be the face. Or, for example, if it turned out that my character was lying, if at the end of the series it turned out that she was setting a man up by lying about the sexual assault, I couldn't be part of that. You know, it wouldn't be, that's not a story that I would want to be the face of. So I asked questions, you know, before I accepted it. And of course, you know, it was absolutely, you know, somebody put me in touch with Jodie Whittaker. She was like, Chris's sound is great. I spoke to Chris. He's obviously got his, you know, everything in the right place about that. But it matters to me, you know, and it really does matter. And I think that, you know, a lot of people, you're representing a group of people who've really gone through something sometimes, and you have a responsibility.
Yeah, no, I agree. What would your advice be around, so younger actors breaking into the industry and they get a script and then maybe they are unhappy, like you might have been, had that rape storyline not being what you wanted it to be, but as someone who's just breaking in, how do they have those conversations with the directors and writers? And would they then be seen as a pain if they're not willing to tell the story that's written? It's quite difficult, I think, for young people to be brave enough without the experience that maybe you and I have had. I mean, I think I might find it quite difficult to kind of, you know, speak to directors and producers about that for whatever reason, because I sort of think, oh, they've written it. So I'm learning a lot from you here, and I'm really, really inspired. But yeah, how would young people approach that and be brave enough to do that at the risk of possibly losing a job, or, you know?
It's really hard, and not for 1 second am I pretending that it isn't, you know, but I do feel like, you know, as performers, you know, sometimes we are made to feel like our voice is very, very unimportant in the process, you know, and the making of any piece of art or any storytelling is a collaboration. Now, I would say that there are some times when, you know, it's not appropriate always to speak out, because you don't want to end up getting a reputation, for example. So the way that you do something is very important. But if you're quite in tune with your own gut and the truth of your own spirit, you know, and what you really believe in, you know, it's different for different people. But if you read something and it really, really rubs against the truth of who you are as a person, then I think that it is a risk worth taking to make your voice heard in that situation, particularly if you have more knowledge because of your personal experience than the people in charge. Yeah. So if you are a young woman who has experienced, for example, sexual assault or harassment, and let's face it, who hasn't if you're a young woman, and you're talking to like a male producer, or, you know, it is absolutely within your right and within your power to say, can I just say that, you know, my experience, you don't have to tell them your personal experience, but you can say, do you feel like this is maybe you know, a slightly male version of what this might feel like. And you can ask the questions, you can frame things. It's a skill that you need to hone. I would say that any person of colour, you know, if you are being asked to play constantly, and luckily I do think this is changing now, because, and you know, not accidentally, not because all the people, you know, in charge have suddenly gone like, oh, do you know, we're just going to be miles better about this. It's because people have been fighting for it for years. But if you are constantly being like cast as, you know, sex workers, pimps, drug dealers, you know, we all know what that has been like. You know, you can say, well, you know, how about seeing me for, you know, the nurse instead? Would that be possible? You know, you can have those conversations at some level, but I would say that if you constantly try and keep true to your breaking point, really, of when you just go, no, this is me doing this is going to be a greater cost than what I will get paid to do it. I would rather work like more shifts in my cafe, restaurant, pub, bar, than actually do something that sits so uncomfortably with the truth of who I am. Then I think that is absolutely valid. Now, your agent might disagree, but I think if you set your stall as somebody who knows their own mind about that stuff, and you don't have to be an arsehole about it. Do you know what I mean? You can be polite and make it a conversation. But I think that it's important.
I think it's important that we empower these young people to trust their own voice, you know, and that they're heard. Because I think they, you know, they can be people can be belittled sometimes and not listened to, and you know, making yourself part of that journey. Because also, if you take something that you don't love, then you're not going to do the best work. You know, I have learned that from experience. You know, it's if you don't love, I've taken it and not loved the script necessarily, and sort of, and you fall out of love with it, you know, and you think, oh God, what am I doing? I'm uncomfortable with everything.
Yeah, it's really hard. And this is stuff about sex scenes as well, and naked, you know, scenes that there's been a lot of conversation around about young women just feeling like they have to do things otherwise, that, you know, but again, I think that's shifting. I do think that's shifting.
It is. We've got we had on the last job that I just did, we had an intimacy coach. Now this is something that should have been around for years and years and years, you know. But my God, I know certainly not for me, because I didn't have to do many of those scenes, but for my colleague, they just learnt this dance and everybody was comfortable and it was out in the open, and there was, you know, it's a great way of working, and intimacy coaching is the way forward. I don't know if you've had any experience with those, but
I haven't, but I heard about it from normal people, you know, because you know, because the sex scenes in Normal People were like full on and really, really sexy and like, but like full on. And I was thinking, oh God, those young people, those young actors, you know, and I heard about it then, and that it was choreographed like a dance, like you say, and that keeps everybody safe and comfortable. And it's not like, you know, we should be not having nakedness, you know, or nudity or sex on screen. And I certainly don't think that for a second, but everybody needs to feel safe. I had to do like a scene in Broadchurch where the director wanted me to have a shower, and you couldn't see much, it was just from behind, but Olivia Colman was all over it. You know, she looks after me so much in that. She was so determined that I wouldn't be, you know, exploited in any way or feel uncomfortable. You know, she was saying, are you comfortable? Are you all right? What can we get her to, you know, and looking after me. And she was also watching the monitor to make sure that, you know, there wasn't watching in that sort of sisterly way of like, you know, if there was a bit of like fat hanging out that a male director just wouldn't see because it just sees you, you know, whatever. But as a woman, you'd just be like, well, you'll hate that when you see it, so I'll just, you know, it's so lovely, you know. And if you've got someone like that on set, everything's so much easier as well.
Yeah, it really is. So your experience at Lambda, can we go back to that and how you found it, and what was it an enjoyable 3 years for you?
It was an enjoyable 3 years for me, and I learned a lot, and it was fantastic. I feel like I was a bit too young to be there. I went when I was 18, and you know, with hindsight, I think I would have got more out of it if I was a little bit more mature. It was a great place. There was a lot of teachers there who'd been part of the sort of the original Royal Court setup, and so our voices as you know, regional actors and with people with accents, you know, there was a lot of emphasis on RP, on received pronunciation, on talking posh, but
they tried to get rid of your accent while you were there a little bit.
Well, no, they didn't, to be fair, but they did want me to. They did one holiday say, like, you go home and talk in RP all Christmas to make it natural to you. And I was just like, no. Oh, no. You don't understand. You know, it's like that won't go down the street in Accrington. If I after one term at drama school, come back and start talking like this, they'd just be like, I mean, I'd have laughed out of town or beaten out of town, you know.
Oh my God.
So they were okay. I mean, I know that there's been massive changes at LAMDA recently, and I think across all the drama schools, and I think that is going to be a really, really positive thing, because, you know, obviously drama schools have become very middle class and very white and very male, because the plays that they're doing and I mean, it's all the same old, you know, everything perpetuates itself, you know. So, and I think that is changing, and you know, and it's great. It's really, really good, and it needs to be, and there needs to be more of an emphasis on making work. And luckily, you know, because of Brian, this teacher I was talking about, he was very into all that. And actually, when I left LAMDA, a group of previous graduates had set up a theatre company, and we built a theatre with Brian. He made us we just built it literally in a basement under a block of flats in Paddington. Amazing. We wrote to every famous person that we could think of. We had like the old spotlight books, and we'd go through and we'd be like, oh yeah, John Gielgud, know him, dear John. And we had to handwrite letters. It was like an analog crowdfunder. Yeah. And we got thousands of pounds off people, because they were so inspired by our energy and enthusiasm for this project. And we built this theatre. We did the seating, the light rig. And every night we'd clean the toilets, work the cafe, and put on plays. And because of the setup again, because we were allowed to sign on, and I'd go to the Dole office every 2 weeks and be saying, I'm running this theatre with my friends, I'm doing plays, I'm writing to casting directors, I'm actively seeking work through being very proactive in this. That was enough for them then. Of course, that's not the case now. They would have me doing like job training. It drives me mad, because that was it was like, I didn't have privilege in terms of coming from money, Charlie, but what I had was state privilege. I had like a state-sponsored apprenticeship in the arts, in that I could do that, and the government was giving. I've paid it back 100-fold in tax since. You know, it works out. It works out in the end, and it enabled me to stay in London and do that, and build up a CV and build up skills of being out in the world that have carried me right on through life. So.
Yeah, you're an inspiration, an absolute inspiration. And the restrictions that are in place now for young people are so frustrating, you know. And
well, it's awful. I mean, you've just got to work so many jobs. How can you ever have the freedom to experiment and make stuff with friends? I mean, you've got to be superhuman to have energy after working like 3 shifts to then meet up with a bunch of friends, but people do it, and that's what I would say to people is try as best you can to make your own work, you know, because if you can sort of find like-minded people and do the work that you want to do, then that's half the battle. You know, you can always find a room somewhere where you can just like charge people a couple of quid to come and see you do something. There are ways and means if you have the energy and wherewithal.
Yeah, and that's what one of the parts of IAMPRO that I absolutely love is the community that it builds, where people can go and find those like-minded people, and you know, people that have shown us their short films and things that they're creating at weekends. It's amazing, and that's, you know, that's how we've got to do it. It's just finding different ways moving forward, isn't it?
Oh, it completely is, and I think there's a sort of there's a misconception that everybody's doing that. Do you know what I mean? That everybody's making short films, that everybody's like putting on like scratch nights and doing like spoken word, and they're not. Do you know? It's like out of a group. You know, I've been to talk to like university students, drama students, you know, and they've put on a talk, and I run a little theatre company in Manchester now, and the three of us who run it have gone to talk to young students about setting up a company and making your own work based on our own experiences. And we've gone, it's been non-compulsory that they're there. It's not part of the module. It's an added extra that the university have put on, and you know, I'd say 20% of the people on the course turned up, and the other 80 didn't. And then you say to that 20%, here's my email. If ever you need anything, if you want any advice, you know, get in touch with me. And I guarantee, and I've done that so many times over the years, that it's usually one person who will, you know. Wow. It's like, and people think, oh no, people are inundated. And we're not, you know, because the person who will do it, the person who does that extra little bit, the person who makes that short film in the 3 hours they've got between one shift, you know, working at that cafe and one shift doing that bar, who goes out with their phone and makes a film with their friends, and then has the wherewithal to send it to someone and say, what do you think? They're the person who'll make it. They absolutely are.
They have to take action and listen to what's on offer and what is being presented in front of them. And I would imagine, you know, when if you gave someone your email and said, get in contact, I can help, they go, oh, I don't want to be a burden, or like you say, I must be inundated. But actually you have to seize these opportunities that are there, because you wouldn't say it if you didn't mean it, you know?
Yeah. 100%. And people are desperate, you know, Charlie, people are desperate to help. People are just like, people get in touch with me and say, I just want to do something. How can I help? You know, people want to feel like they're doing something to support the generation coming through, you know, and if people don't get back to you, they don't get back to you, you know. It's
Nothing to lose. You've got to take what's on offer, kids. It's there at your fingertips for the taking.
Absolutely. It is. There are lots of opportunities. I mean, the very fact that people are here doing this is great. Yes. You know, that's like a massive step that you've made in joining this community. So
like, I know when the people that turn up at open mic night, the people that are registering for the live classes, you know, the ones that are taking the action and making stuff happen, you know.
Yeah, and they're the artists of the future. They are the ones, you know, they're the ones who, like, a really, really good example. I lived in a shared house in London back in the 90s, and we were all working at a local pub and like doing Arts Threshold, this theatre and other people. But there were people who left drama school and went straight to the RSC and went straight to all those places that we're told are the places that you have to go in order to be successful. And almost without fail, I mean, not completely, but almost, the people who were left like having to create things themselves. So I lived with Natasha Chivers, who's like an Olivier award-winning lighting designer, who did her first lighting design on the like rubbish little sort of board we had at Arts Threshold. I lived with Stephen Hoggart, who was one of the original Frantic Assembly, you know, Stephen and Scott, who set up Frantic Assembly. I know, and that's and they're the language of theatre now, you know. I mean, he's like, multi-award win. And he Stephen went to Swansea University and had a workshop with a physical theatre company, really liked it, set up a little theatre company. They did Look Back in Anger, a physical version of that. And look at him now. You know, he wasn't one of the ones who was snapped up and taken somewhere. He created it and created it. It can be years. But it's the people who are making their own work who are the artists of the future, for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Can I just talk before, oh gosh, we're 33 minutes in, I could talk to you all day.
Oh, I'm sorry, I never want to be short on words.
Just a little bit about how you approach a script and what advice you have around how you, and how that differs between TV and theatre, if it differs. Just want to explore those two things, if that's okay. I'll be taking notes.
Oh God, I know. Well, I'd like to know why you do it. Actually, it's funny because you get asked this, don't you? And you sort of fall into ways of doing it. I try and be really, really thorough. I do try. I try and be thorough and specific because the actors that I like are, you know, so for example, on Corrie, you know, you get loads and loads of scripts on Corrie, but I always read all the scripts because even though it was massively time consuming, rather than just filleting out my scenes, because I like being part of a whole, and I know that writers sometimes have like motifs running through, or a theme, or the pace of the episode depends on like something being a bit bum 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 bum, or something that can breathe a bit. And I don't feel like you know that unless you can see the whole arc of it. Some people disagree with me on that. You know, I know people who are just dead instinctive and can just do it. You know, with a theatre script, I do uniting. You know, I like set it into sections, and so that I can have change of thoughts, and I find it helps me to be quite specific about what I want in each particular one. Line learning, I do it on the move. That's absolutely the best way for me to do it. So I just go walking with my scripts in my hand. It's usually like a scrumpled up bit of like paper, or they just like roll up, and I go over it and over and over it. And there is no way to learn lines but putting in the hours, and it's the worst bit of it. But
I'm so happy you said that. It is literally the worst part of it.
It is. It really is. And it's just so... I just did a short film with Nottingham Playhouse, and I had to go down, and Adam, the director, had said to me, "Oh, it's just a 5-minute thing. Would you mind doing it?" I was like, "Oh, no, I'd love to," you know. And it's like, it was 15 minutes. It was like a 7-page monologue. And he was like, "You can do it next week, week after." I was like, "The week after, please." And he's like... just wander around these streets, you know, just constantly talking to myself, and I just have to hammer it in and hammer it in and hammer it in. I always try and think about where the person's been, where she's going. I try and like have an idea of background, a backstory. You know, I do try and flesh it out as much as possible, and I do try to be as specific to what is written as is possible, because I feel like when I'm not completely sure of the words and I jam around them a bit, and you know, Charlie, there are actors who make a living out of jamming around, you know, it's just like somewhere in there's the originally written line, you know, it's just like, it becomes baggy, and like, it doesn't have, you know, writers are brilliant, and they write things for a reason, and unless you absolutely can't make a line work, you must try to, you know, because we can all do it in our own voice and kind of like make it sound, you know, more like we would say something. But the trick is to try and be specific. You've got to put in the work, you've got to put in the hours, so that when you're in the rehearsal room, you're ready, and you can then be free to have those moments, but those lovely moments, Charlie, where you're doing it and you do something that's completely unexpected because you know the words so well, they've gone into a bit of your brain where you're not having to see it on the page and think about it, and then you do something that takes yourself by surprise sometimes.
Isn't that the most brilliant place to be?
Oh, it's amazing. And then the next night you try and do it again because you're too scared. You're like, "Oh, I really like what I did last night," and then it falls flat because you're not in the moment. You know,
you've overthought it too much. And like, I haven't got a clue what I did. And what happens if you don't like what has been written and you feel like you might be able to improve on it slightly? Do you have the conversation with the director or the writer? Are you comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I am comfortable doing that because I think that they know that I've done the work. So it's not like it's so funny because we've both worked on soaps. We both know what this is. It's not like I've come in and just gone like, "Oh, blah, 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 blah." And they've gone like, "Well, this is what it says." And then you just go, it's better like this. You know, it's if you go and say like 2 days before, "This line, it doesn't sit comfortably with me because of this. Is it okay if I turn that around? Can I just cut that little bit?" I really, you know, if you do that, and if you don't make a habit of it, if you really save those, then people take you seriously. You know, if you're constantly just like, you know, messing around with it, if you're somebody who doesn't know your lines properly and is like pretending that you've changed it because you haven't been asked to learn it properly, that's really different from someone who's clearly done the prep and who's just going like, you know.
And Julie, when you're on stage, do you have a preference, by the way, with TV? I know it's, when people ask me this, I can never really answer it because they both offer very different things, don't they? I find theatre very nourishing, actually, and good for my soul. but terrifying. So with your theatre work, do you feel the nerves when you on opening night? Is that something you get more comfortable with as time goes on?
Yeah, I think that, I think you've got to be a sociopath not to be nervous walking out in front of like 700 people and like having to remember loads of things. I mean, you know, it's just like you have to be made of different stuff than I am to go out without any nerves. It's using it. It's using that nervousness. I think the most valuable thing that I have learnt is that audiences don't care if you mess up. They really, really, as long as you're all right with it. And my God, I have messed up. I have messed up so many times. I've tried. I've missed out sections. I was doing a one-woman show a couple of years ago, last year, in Trafalgar Studios. And I remember being in the middle of a bit, and I've done this show so many times. I know it like the back of my hand. And I remember allowing myself a moment to go, it's going really well tonight. I think I think this might be the best I've ever done it. And I had that thought, and I thought, oh, there's people I know in as well. That's great. It's great. There's people to witness this. And then I'd missed out a whole section, and I had to stop. And I had to say, oh, I'm really sorry, everybody. I've missed a whole section, so I'm just going to go back. And they all will like laugh nervously. But because I mean, obviously my legs went hollow, like they do when you make a mistake like that, and you could pass out. But because I just said it. I mean, I heard about Lenny Henry on the opening night, the press night of Educating Rita at Chichester, completely dried. And he stopped and he said, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to take a moment. I don't know where I am. And he walks off stage. The young girl playing Rita was like, gonna follow him up, just like, oh God, can you imagine? And he came back on, and all the reviews mentioned it because he'd handled it so well. So rather than him falling to pieces, and obviously he will have like absolutely beaten himself up all night about it, I'm sure. But that people like to know that they're watching something live, so they don't mind. And it's such a hard lesson to learn because you do want it to be perfect and everything. But there's nothing more boring than someone coming off stage after you've seen them and they've really moved you and you've loved it, and they come off and they're just like, oh, it was really bad tonight. Oh, the audience were really quiet, and you're just like that. You don't need to know that. You know, you just do it as best you can, and know you'll make mistakes, and know that as long as you don't fall to pieces, you know, it's live art. That's what it is. That's the joy and the peril of it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've gone into a state of blind panic where, like your legs just sort of go beneath you, and I don't know where I am, what I'm doing. My mouth then couldn't move. It was so dry. My lips were sticking my teeth. I was like, oh, I don't know how to handle this. But director said to me once, I think I've shared this once before on a Q&A, but he was just like, if that happens, he said, just stop. He said, and just pause and take a breath.
Yeah, take a breath. Put a bit of space around you.
You are in control of it. He said, you have the power, and just know that. All of the work is there, you know, so let it all settle and then just pick it up when it comes. And I was like, I hope that I can be that powerful at that moment.
Yeah, and you know, Charlie, you come off and you say like, oh my God, and people go like, oh, I didn't notice. Half of the time people just absolutely don't know. To you, it's the world crashing and you feel like you've gone bright red, you feel like your legs have gone. And actually, you know, if you can just stop and just give it. For me, I feel like, I don't know whether it's like this for you. Sometimes I'm saying the words and there's air around it. So I know what's coming next, but I just know there's just space. And sometimes I'm right on the line. And those nights when I'm right on it are the edgy ones. Right, because as it's coming out of my mouth, it's right there and there's no space. So if there's a gap, I've nowhere to go. And then there's other nights when I'm just comfortable in it and there's just enough breath. And it's like, it's fun. It's a mysterious thing. It's like
so joyful when you get into that on the stage. That is the meditation, isn't it? When you're sort of completely outside of your own consciousness and in somebody else's world on that stage, and just in flow and responsive and listening to everything that goes on around you. It's just so beautiful. It really
is.
I would love to be on the stage with you one day, Julie.
Oh, I'm it's so funny, you know, because when I did this thing in Nottingham this week, the photographer said to me, I saw Charlie Brooks, and I was like, oh, I'm actually having a chat with Charlie. I saw her in Streetcar. She was absolutely amazing. He was raving about you in it. It's like, it's like it had really touched him. So yeah, it'd be lovely if we could do something. Yeah, and maybe with one of you, whoever you are, you mysterious people out there.
Yes. IAMPRO subscribers, listen to Julie. Take everything that's on offer that we're offering you. Lap it up as much as you can. You know, you won't regret it. Julie, thank you so much for your time. I literally could talk to you all night and would quite like to.
Same. Thank you so much for having me, and keep at it, everyone, and just keep working and don't lose heart. And one thing I'd want to say to you is that I read this, well, two things actually, Charlie, if we've got time. There's a book by Andy Nyman called Golden Rules of Acting, and it's a tiny little book. You can just get it on Amazon or from your local bookshop, really, really cheap, and it's tiny, and it's full of pearls. And one of the pearls is just enjoy yourself, you'll work more. You know, if you can fill your life with interesting things, you know, if you go to an audition and they say, so what have you been up to? And you just go, well, nothing, it's been a pandemic, it's been absolutely dead, you know. That is a very different thing from someone coming to the room and saying like, well, actually, I joined IAMPRO and I made a short film on the phone and I wrote some spoken word for the first time and I performed it at an open mic and I did this. And suddenly you're alive with stuff, and it might not be paid work. It might not be anything that's like, you know, made like the BAFTA noms. But what it is it gives you, it fills you with stuff that you can then use later on, you know. So all the times when it's quiet, just keep filling the well so you've got something to draw on. And this little book is full of pearls like that. And always remember that there'll always be somebody above you and there'll always be somebody below you. So you'll always see somebody going like, you know, you win an Oscar and then what? You've got to win two. You've got to beat Frances McDormand's record then. You know, you've got to be like, and there'll always be someone watching your career going like, oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could have 2 lines as a nurse on Corrie, you know, that. Just be aware that it's a spectrum and you're all on it, and you don't have to pull the ladder up from you when you get any modicum of success, and you don't have to constantly be looking at, you know, the people who would step ahead of you. Just be where you are and inhabit that world and just live it to the best of your ability. Yeah,
enjoy that journey. That journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, thank you. My heart feels full after our chat. It really does. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Absolute pleasure, and good luck to everyone, and thanks for doing what you do, Charlie.
Thank you, darling. I'm sending you so much love.
Back to you.
Speak soon. Bye.
Bye.